Author of Tanking to the Top, Yaron Weitzman. Thank you, sir, for joining us again. I wish it was under better circumstances, but it's been an odd time. Let's first talk about basketball a little bit and what we've seen this week. What have you seen from the NBA and the players and the stands that they've taken?
What have I seen, you said? And thanks for having me.
No problem at all. Yeah, what have you seen from the players this week? Are you surprised at all by it and how it's shaken out and the athletes really trying to make the most of the platform they have there? You know them very well.
Surprised, can I say yes and no? I think we're seeing emotion. Well, you see a lot of people kind of, people who maybe don't necessarily agree with the stance, and I don't even like the word stance, I think that's the wrong word here. And like the answer is often, what do they want? The owner said this, what do they want people to do? And I think the starting point has to be, and if you heard Doc Rivers talk, if you heard some of these other players talk in these post-game or media sessions, you hear like they're emotionally hurt, right? They're seeing their own people being shot by police, and that is clearly hurting them, as understandably so. So I think that's the starting point here. It kind of seems like, and some of the, you want to call it disorder, and some of the notes are coming out, the reports are coming out about the meetings with players and people, disagreeing on things, which is normal. This is a big group of people that are going to have different opinions and views on things. But I think emotions and just hurt and frustration and anger is the starting point. From there, I think we're seeing players recognizing their power and their ability to the leverage that they have, right, to push owners. So we're seeing some concrete things, whether it's getting, the Milwaukee lieutenant governor on the phone to reconvene the state legislator to push through a criminal reform or police reform bill, or, turning every arena into a voting area. The stuff that LeBron has done, we're seeing them recognize their leverage as opposed to just, the statements like Black Lives Matter in the court are one thing, but there's concrete things they can do too, and we're seeing that as well.
Yaron, do you see them being in the bubble and being in this small space together, basically 24 hours a day, as kind of a benefit for being able to work these things out amongst themselves and also to be able to coordinate a response in how they want to move forward?
It's a good question. I don't know if I would say benefit. I think it lends itself more to some of what we're seeing. Maybe that's how I would put it, right? So for one, a giant players meeting, that's unprecedented. Like there's in the history of sports, you've had things, I think, I don't remember the year, but the NBA union was first formed in about the 60s, I believe it was. The All-Stars refused to go out without if the league didn't recognize the players union. They used their leverage and said, we're not going to go out and play in this All-Star game unless the league recognizes our union. So you've seen like little groupings like that have whatever it was, 100 or however many players, 200 players, whatever we're at left in the bubble, convene together and discuss these things. So no, like we wouldn't see that otherwise. The bubble lends itself to that. It also is, and Jaylen Brown sort of brought this up in the meeting, according to reports. He said to players who said they wanted to, cancel the season, and he reportedly challenged them and said, and no one specific, but said, if you go home, if we leave, are you just going to go home and hang out, or are you going to be on the streets and protesting? And that's part of it too, right? Your options here are limited. So I don't know if I would use the word benefit, but it's a good point, right? I do think the situation here lends itself to some of what we're seeing.
So not to minimize that conversation, but they did decide that they're going to continue playing basketball after some of the agreements they had. When play restarts, there'll be lots of great games played. The Sixers will not be playing them. The Celtics series was a disaster, yet probably not surprising for lots of people. Your thoughts on what we saw from this team in the bubble, and then what has happened since with the removal of Brett Brown and talk of potential other changes?
Yeah, the bubble was obviously the playoffs did not go well. The way I kind of put it is it was a culmination of years of mishaps, right? And, we always have to add the caveat. It's a big caveat. Ben Simmons missed the series. That's a huge thing. Ben Simmons, for all his worth, is a great player, top 20. He's one of, if not the best, or just let's say one of the best defenders in the NBA. He can't shoot, but he creates all sorts of offensive opportunities via transition or three-pointers for others, things like that. So his absence obviously makes a huge difference. That said, the Celtics, and some of the games were close, right? You got to give them that, but you saw just the idea, the problems with the way the team was built, the roster construction, how the players don't fit. And again, it's a culmination of years of mistakes going back to post Sam Hinkie, the idea of chasing things, using lots of draft picks to go after single guys, not building or not surrounding your two-star players, neither of whom can shoot, with shooters, not prioritizing shooting in space. And yeah, it just was obvious it was time. I think Brett Brown would agree it was time for a new coach as well. I do think there's a opportunity here that things went so, and I'll say quote unquote badly, and maybe you can even agree, but that's at least the perception. And it seems to be a reset happening within the Sixers organization, or some willing introspection in a way they haven't done so in years. And I think that could lead to some positive change, but only time will tell.
Yaron, you wrote the book on the process, tanking to the top. If you could add a chapter to the end of it, predicting what's going to happen over the next year or two, what would be your prediction of what's going to happen next?
A prediction. It's funny. I got the paperback coming out soon. I got to submit to the paperback. I got to add in.
I told you got to add another chapter.
We'll just take the audio
and how I think.
You know,
I was. Say it again. I'm sorry.
We'll just take the audio from this conversation. You can put it down in a chapter. You'll be gold.
Exactly. Well, it's funny because the book had, like, I think, if I may say so, I think the book predicted a lot of what we're talking about and what people are talking about here. And, the idea of accountability in the culture was certainly a through line, it seems, to the book. And yet I ended it on a positive note. And I joke to friends all the time that maybe I could just burn the last 4 pages, where I say everything looks like it's going to be okay. But in terms of going forward, yeah, it's tough, right? I'm fascinated to see what happens this offseason. I do think Elton Brand will be the one making decisions here in a way, and have a singular power in a way that we haven't seen from a Sixers executive since Brian Colangelo left. I do think that could be beneficial. Again, we don't know. Elton Brand will have to show that that's a skill of his. But I would be, if I'm a Sixers fan, I would be a bit optimistic about that. The question is whether they're in too deep. And I do think within, it's so hard also with the calendar because who the hell knows when the season starts, right? But I do think at some point their team will see, and no one told me this, but just guessing, we'll see discussions about Simmons and Embiid trades, not because, or I should say for the main reason being that there's no other way to get out of the purgatory they're kind of stuck in here with, like, no shooters. The Horford, they're going to have to attach assets to get off of Horford, the Tobias Harris contract. They don't have any draft picks yet. So that might be something that has to be discussed. It'll be fascinating to see what kind of moves along the margin they look at.
You mentioned sort of the potential for moves. They have the highest payroll and luxury tax bill projected in league history for next season. Obviously, the pieces don't fit. You're thinking they may try and make some moves. If they don't move Simmons or Embiid, if they keep some of these pieces, is there a coach out there, a voice that you think is somebody that would be effective for this team, or do you think that it's a new voice?
No, I do. I think I don't know. Ty Lue, I think that should be, and that I have a feeling is going to be the guy they're going to go for. He's got choices basically between the Nets, maybe Rockets, and the Pelicans. Those are all good options, good opportunities. I would be most intrigued, even as a basketball fan. I shouldn't say as a Sixers fan, but as a basketball fan, I'm most intrigued by the prospect of Ty Lue coaching the team. He's coached big time players before under the spotlight. He's, I wasn't around him at all in Cleveland, but all reports and stories are that he was willing to kind of check LeBron a little bit, check Kyrie a little bit. He knew how to deal with them. He wouldn't be a doormat for them. That's obviously something that can be relevant and applicable, a skill that could be applicable in Philadelphia. The Clutch Sports connection, Ben Simmons, Clutch Sports, same age as LeBron, that obviously would help the Ty Lue relationship. I think he would be the guy that I'd want, and I'd actually be intrigued to see how that works. The question then could become, how good is Ty Lue schematically? And to that, if he won a championship, I do not know either way. I'm not, that I don't have an answer for.
You mentioned the introspection in the front office at this time. Jeff and I have kind of talked for a couple of weeks about the concern we had of the relationship with the owners directly with the players and how that might put a coach in a very difficult position. Joel Embiid staying at the owner's house during this. Any thoughts on the ownership group and where that stands with this team right now?
Yeah, they're handsy. So the owner, you're talking about Michael Rubin, who's a minority owner. So he has no say in like team actual team decisions or anything like that. But there's still the optics of it, and you always wonder. Minority owners, like, they still have some weight they can throw around, and I do think that can create some problems. As for the primary owner, Josh Harris, he's always been very handsy and involved, and obviously his prerogative, and he owns the team. It's good to want to have an idea of what's going on, but things as much as like negotiating the Jimmy Butler trade or parts of it, right, at ownership level or other decisions, like at some point you have to hand that off 2-year basketball guys, and that has not been the case. And more specifically through Scott O'Neil, who's the team's CEO and works for the Harris Blitzer Sports Group, which is the the parent company essentially that owns all the sports teams, the Sixers, the Devils. Scott O'Neil is the CEO for them, sort of a the right arm of ownership. He is heavily involved in basketball decisions. I don't mean he's like on draft calls or that he's scouting guys, but he has a say, and he is allowed to have a say. I do think that can create concerns and issues.
If the Sixers had not traded Jimmy Butler and had held on to him in this offseason, would we be having the same conversation today?
The Jimmy Butler thing is interesting because, obviously X and O wise, and you look at him, that's the one they messed up on, or they missed on, right? I should rephrase it. He's the perfect player for them. I think temperamentally a bit, and also in terms of his skill set. It was not so simple. Like, to me, the mistake not necessarily was moving off Jimmy Butler. I don't think that relationship with him and Brett Brown was tenable. There was concerns about how Ben Simmons would feel with Jimmy Butler being there as a guy who's going to run your half-court offense for the most part, especially in crunch time. So to me, there are valid reasons why you don't want to do that. I think they could have, sucked it up and just dealt with it, and they could have emerged on the other side and been really close and had a championship level team. But I get why not. To me, the mistake was in taking those resources and devoting them to another center as opposed to a wing.
So if you look back at all the moves that the Sixers have made through this process, which one would you say is the one that fatally led to where we are right now?
Yeah. So there's 3, right? There's the Fultz trade, which is that wasn't great, but that was it was more bad luck than anything else, right? I think it's fair to say pretty much everyone except the Celtics had Fultz as becoming something really good, and it didn't work out. So there's that. The other one's the Tobias Harris trade and then contract. They gave up a ton for Tobias Harris. I think it was 2 first-round picks, and seconds, Landry Shamet. For Harris, who the Clippers weren't going to re-sign anyway, he was an impending free agent. They needed to clear that contract to go get Kawhi. So the Sixers had leverage there. They did not use it. So they gave up a ton, and then they signed Harris to this max deal or near max deal. Harris is a really good player. He's a even better person. He is probably not worth that max contract. And that can handicap you a little bit. And then it's the other one. It's the voting more so than the Jimmy Butler thing. It's been targeting Al Horford as where you're going to devote your resources to, as opposed to, let's say, I'm not saying they could have done this, or I'm not saying he would have signed with them, but like a Malcolm Brogdon type who was a free agent last year, it would have been a perfect fit for this team. So to me, it's like those are the 3.
Yaron, we always appreciate the time you give us. We look forward to seeing that additional chapter in the book, and wish you good health and good coverage watching the rest of the NBA.
Thank you, guys. Appreciate it as always.